Could move away somewhere where no one knew us. We could say James was adopted. We could be the happy family we both always wanted to have. Betrayed by lifelong love. A trip through HE double hockey sticks and out the other side. Dear True Story, I wanted to reach out to you and let you know how much I have enjoyed your channels. I found your channels as well as SSM and a few others about a year past. Now I never miss an update. Like so many of your subscribers and viewers, I am a member of that sad fraternity of betrayed men. My D-Day was in 1996, and it was as dramatic as it could be. I'd love to share my story with you, but more importantly, the lessons that can be learned from it, specifically what not to do. I did a lot wrong, almost everything, in fact. My ex-wife was a pretty little thing. We were close friends as far back as 7th grade. We had each lost both of our parents at a young age and bonded over that shared trauma. Sorry to hear that, man. She was raised by relatives and I was in a foster care. My foster family were great people. Their eldest son, Stephen, and I still are close friends to this day. They always treated me kindly, but in truth, our relationship was more about caretaking. I lived with them for 11 years, but I wasn't family. More like a long-term guest would be how I would describe it. So when it came to emotional bonding, it was the girl who would later become my wife that I turned to. Throughout high school, my ex-wife and I were inseparable. We were in a relationship before either of us were old enough to even know what that means. All our memories of our teen years were shared. Proms, dances, parties, all of it. After graduation, I joined the Marine Corps. This was 1988. I had no means of paying for school, so the military seemed like a good option. We kept a long-distance relationship going as best we could. My MOS in the Marines had me working on generators, chillers, and other power equipment during my service. My ex attended a local community college and took some business classes. After Desert Storm in 91, I came home on leave and proposed to her. She accepted, and we got married right away. We were both 21 then, far too young. I had done very well in the Marine. I had received a promotion to sergeant and was a candidate for the warrant officer program. I was planning on being a lifer. Unfortunately, she was very unhappy with the life of a military wife. So, at the end of my contract in 93, I left the service. We moved back to our old hometown, and I found work as an electrician. I didn't really enjoy the work. The hours were long and tiring, but I made enough to support us both. She did part-time work as a medical office for a little while, but left that after a year. She wasn't the same girl as I remembered. She was never the party type, but now she was going out for girls' nights. Here we go. Here we go. Usually twice a month in the beginning. Later on, they became more frequent, and we began to argue over it. The friends she was hanging out with were women I didn't know, and I really didn't care for. I suspect that feeling was mutual. The girls' night stopped when she got pregnant in late 95. I was overjoyed. I was really looking forward to being a father. Considering my childhood, I had dreamed of giving a kid everything I never had. She became more loving and affectionate than ever, and for the first time since leaving the Marines, I was truly happy. I built a nursery in our home. The pregnancy, the time flew by. She went into labor July 13th, 1996, and gave birth to a healthy baby boy named James. I was not his father. Whomever his father is, he was a different ethnicity from either my ex-wife or myself. 28 years later, and I still remember with crystal clarity how I felt. An eternity in HE double hockey sticks could not be worse than the 20 minutes in the delivery room after the birth. See, like I was saying on the last story, those girl trips and solo trips and getting drunk, like, no. If you want to be in a serious relationship, you don't do that. But let me get back to the story. It's not over, guys. I'm sorry. I just got triggered. It was awkward when the nurse tried to hand James to me, and I didn't want to take him. My ex-wife was crying. Later, I was asking for James's blood type. That confirmed the obvious to me. He was not my son. Later on, I had a proper paternity test done, just to be sure. I sat in the waiting room for hours after the birth. I stared at the TV, but I didn't see. I drank coffee, but it didn't taste. It occurred to me I had lost everything. I thought about leaving the hospital or maybe leaving the state, but I had nowhere to go and forever to get there. Someone told me my wife was awake. I went to her room. She started crying the moment she saw me. I said nothing. My face must have been completely expressionless, a virtual stone mask. I sat in the chair next to the bed and listened to her quiet sobs. Finally, she said my name, and I was asking who the father is. "You are his father," she said. "He needs you. I need you. I love you." "Not enough to be faithful to me," I retorted. I told her honesty was the very least she owed me. She told me everything, or at least enough if not everything. It was the girls' nights with her friends. They were spent drinking, clubbing, and sometimes hookups with random guys. That's exactly what happens when these girls go on these solo trips. One single boat, it doesn't matter. Do not let your wife or your girlfriend do something like that, please. Unless you don't care about getting cheated on. Not at all what she had told me they were doing when this was happening. It wasn't serious, she said, just fun. It meant nothing. She said she only loved me. Well, yeah, she needs you to raise the kid. I was asking if she even bothered to use protection. She at least had the grace to look ashamed. Apparently not, or we wouldn't be here now, I said bitterly. We talked for a little while, not sure how long. I was completely numb through most of it. She cried, she pleaded, she bargained. We could move away, somewhere where no one knew us. We could say James was adopted. We could be the happy family we both always wanted to have. It would be just us against the world, again, just like when we first met. She often said we had the best love story of any couple ever. She begged me to please not let our love story end this way. She almost had me. She had almost persuaded me to try and forgive the unforgivable. Almost. You must understand, she was my world, my first and the only friend. I barely remember my parents. I was a young child when they passed. I wasn't close with my foster family, not in that way. Whatever I knew of love, I learned from her. She was my person. Leaving her would be like losing half of my soul. I could not imagine life without her, but she betrayed me. I gave up a rewarding military career for her happiness, and she betrayed me. Y'all hear that? Whew. I worked a job I hated to support her and the family we both wanted, and she betrayed me. So far as I knew, she was the only person alive in the world who had ever loved me, and she betrayed me. My thought process always came back to that fact. She betrayed me. All these things she was promising me that night had been promised to me before. Promises were made when we said our vows in a dingy courthouse office. Promises had been made during 100 or more late-night pillow talks after lovemaking. Promises that had been made on all-night phone calls between two love-stick teenagers. Promises were made in letters read and written in sandbag bunkers in Saudi Arabia, a dozen other places. A lifetime of promises. I kept them. She didn't. And my reward for forgiving all those broken promises would be a life spent raising someone else's son with a wife I could never trust again. I would never forgive her. I knew it. And if I tried, I would never forgive myself. The nurse brought James into the room and placed him in her arms. She looked at me hopefully, but I stood up and walked to the door. She said my name. "This is where our love story ends," I said quietly. I left the hospital. When I got to my truck in the parking lot, I broke down utterly and wept. It would be the next to last time in my life I would ever do that. The next 3 years were chaos. First, the divorce was a complete disaster. We had lived in a mobile home I had bought for us on land that belonged to her relatives. She got that, Because we were married and neither of us could name a biological father, the fact that James was not my son was irrelevant. Paternity was presumed, and the best interests of the child were of paramount concern. Since she was not in the workplace, she needed spousal support plus the child support. It accounted for more than half of my salary. I realized the divorce laws in my state were completely against me, but I'd also like to recommend my lawyer for the Underachiever of the 20th Century Award. I was offered visitation with James by her in the courts, but declined. She became very angry about that and other things, and did everything she could to make the process painful. By mid 1997, it was over. I was nearly dead broke, living in a rundown travel trailer in a dirty campground. I was still working, sometimes 50 to 60 hours a week, but with very little to show for it. I was so broken and had fallen so low I could not even imagine ever rising again. So I drank. I crawled into a bottle and stayed there for 2 years. 1998 and most of 1999 were a blur. I was drunk nearly every night, as long as I wasn't too sick to drink, but when I did drink, I couldn't sleep. I had never had a good relationship with booze. In the Marines, hard drinking was the accepted norm. I didn't indulge much after I left the service, but during and after the divorce, I lost all pretense of self-control. I never spoke nor interacted in any way with my ex-wife or her son. I had the child support and alimony payments directly deposited from my check into her bank, so I wouldn't have to even write her name on a paper. At some point, I had heard my ex-wife had a blended family and was living with a new man and was apparently very happy. Somehow, that made things worse. I hated her intensely. I hated James just for existing. He was a beautiful 2-year-old little boy who was completely innocent, and I hated him. That made me hate myself. Today I look back on the man I became, and I'm so ashamed. I had become a sad, pathetic, hateful drunk. I was seriously considering putting myself out of my misery. I didn't think anyone would notice or even care if I did. I was wrong. The helping hand I needed came from Stephen, my foster brother. He was a successful dentist by now with a beautiful family. I received a FedEx from him with air tickets to Louisiana and an open invitation to stay with them if I wanted. During the visit, he said something to me that changed my life. Have you done anything since the divorce that has made your life better? You got knocked down. Life will do that to you. But staying down is a choice you made. He was right. 2 nights later, I attended my first AA meeting. That was almost 25 years ago, and I have not had a drink in all that time. God willing, I will never do that again. In 2000, I moved to Louisiana and started a business with Stephen and another partner selling, leasing, and servicing generators for business and residential use. We were struggling to get by until something happened in 2005, Hurricane Katrina. The irony of life is how something so awful can be a boon for someone. In the months and years following the storm and recovery, our business exploded. In just 4 years, we went from 2 silent partners and 1 guy, me, doing all the work, to 16 employees with an office and a warehouse. I found myself feeling happy again. It was a great feeling. In 2015, I received a call that rocked my world. A deep male voice on the phone was asking for me my first last name. I answered in the affirmative. "This is James, my last name," he said simply. I was speechless. He was asking if we could talk. I did some quick math in my head. He was 19 years old now. I had made my last child support payment the previous year. We spoke for 40 minutes or so. What he told me left a feeling in me that is so difficult to describe. For most of his life, my ex-wife told him I was his real father and that I had abandoned them both and left them with nothing. And he hated me from afar. Then, when he was 17, his stepfather told him the truth, all the truth, about the circumstances of his birth and the divorce between my ex-wife and I. James found out that I paid child support money for his welfare every month and never missed a payment. Then he thanked me for that. This little boy I had hated for no fault of his own thanked me for doing something I was forced to do. He was a far better man already than I could ever be. And in that moment, I felt such regret that I refused to even a small part of his life. He told me about his stepfather and the close bond they had. It's possible that he was meant to raise James, which means I was meant to endure all I had. God works in his own ways. It's something I've spent a lot of time thinking over. James was asking if we could keep in touch, and I told him I would like that very much. After the call, I broke down again and wept for the last time. I have never met the man my ex wife ended up with. He sounds like a decent fellow with integrity and humility. I hope my ex wife treated him better than she did me. I had hated her for so long, and hearing that she lied to this young man for reasons only she could ever know, I didn't know how to feel about it. She made him hate me, but because of the actions of someone who had never even met me, James put that aside. That day, I finally forgave my ex wife for everything that happened. All of it. She will never know I did, though. She will never even know the grudge existed. But I do. Only when you forgive them, you will truly be free of them. 2022, we sold the company. For the first time in my adult life, I had a substantial amount of money. I had spent most of my life one payday away from being dead broke. I'm semi-retired now. I live in a small town. I live in a small town in Louisiana on the Gulf Coast and run a small boat dock business selling gas, bait beverages, and snacks. I bought a boat and I live on it full time. I adopted an elderly dog from the shelter, and we spend our days listening to the radio from our dockside store or fishing. We do that almost every day. I live a very simple life. I don't even have a TV. I don't pay attention to the news. I read books from the library and follow the Braves on the radio. I occasionally surf the web on an old laptop I used to keep my banking. And of course, I listen to True Story and SSM on YouTube. I never pursued another relationship other than casual fun, like you are fond of saying, it isn't worth it. James came to visit me last summer. He is an officer in the U.S. Navy and was briefly stationed in Pensacola. We went fishing and talked for a long time. He is a good man, great one even. He was asking if I'd like to pass a message to his mother. I just said, tell her I had found peace and happiness and I hoped she had too. He smiled and said he would. I read A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway a little while ago. There is a line in it that has stuck with me. The world breaks everyone, and afterwards, many are strong in the broken places. But those that will not break, it kills. The lessons I think that can be taken from my experiences are: a man should never depend on someone else for their emotional support. You have to be your own best friend. You have to be your own rock. The women you meet and fall in love with expect you to save them. And if you want to, you should. But always remember, no one is going to save you but you. Never submerge your dreams and goals to someone else's happiness. If they can't be happy with you doing what you need to do, then part ways with them. This was my second biggest mistake. Girls' nights equals trouble. Yes. yes. Shut that stuff down if you can. Be hyper vigilant if you can't. She will cheat on you 100%. Don't drown your troubles with booze. It won't work anyway. They can swim. Forgive them. Don't hate them. Let it go. You're doing that for yourself, not for them. Hating someone is like lighting yourself on fire and hoping they get burned. This was my biggest mistake. No matter what happened to you today, the sun will still rise tomorrow. You can't stop it. You can't change yesterday. You can't fix today. How tomorrow turns out is the only thing you can control. Thanks, True Story, for your indulgence in reading this. Like you used to say, wise men learn from the mistakes of others, and I made many. Best wishes to you and all the folks in True Story Nation. Wow. What a freaking story, dude. Oh my gosh. I'm glad at the end, dude, you survived. You freaking survived through that, man. It's so hurtful when you do so much for somebody You go out of your way and you do so much for someone only for them to give you their butts to kiss. Man. She's going out to these girls' night out, and I agree with you. No girls' night outs. It's going to lead to something bad, cheating, you know? And you learn that. I know this, dude. I've been out with friends. Married women are giving it up. My friends are with these women.